Hello guys, this is your host Horror Studio 1, and the reason that we're going to be introducing the video in this way is because I have something to tell you. I don't know if you guys heard, but I am living in Asia, and recently there is a typhoon called Mangkhut that's hit Hong Kong. At the very moment that I'm recording this, it is a number 10 typhoon, meaning it is insane. There's already been 28 people that died in the Philippines because of this typhoon. I'm going to show you guys how it looks. There's leaves everywhere. The rainstorm is just insanely bad. If you guys see the trees flopping everywhere, buildings are falling down here in Hong Kong. So one thing I want to tell you guys is hopefully I'll get this video made in time and be able to have it uploaded. But one thing is, while I was recording the video, because the weather was so bad, you will hear rain sounds in the back. So, oh my god, look at that shit, man. That's just what I wanted to tell you guys. Yeah, so enjoy the video if you guys can. With the rainy atmosphere. I'm trying my best to upload videos, guys. I swear to God I am. It's really hard to upload videos here. Alright, enjoy.
Chaos on a transatlantic flight. This was a long time ago, so the timeline might be a little bit off and some details are fuzzy, but I've written it out exactly as I recall it. In the early 2000s, my family was living in Europe, and in December of 2001 we were coming back home from Latin America for Christmas vacation. My brother and I, both in high school at the time, and my dad were flying together from Paris to Miami. My dad was seated in business class, while my brother and I were in coach, sitting in the middle two seats of the middle row. The flight was pretty normal at first, absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. About 4 or 5 hours into the flight, I was reading a book, almost dozing off, when I heard a woman start to repeat the word "no" over and over. At first, it was really quiet, almost inaudible, but it quickly got very loud and urgent. Before I realized what was happening, she was screaming "no, no, no" at the top of her lungs. I looked up and saw a flight attendant a few rows ahead of me to the right, hunched over someone sitting on the window seat. My first thought was that a passenger was having a heart attack or some catastrophic health problem, but her yelling was so unsettling that this couldn't be it. There was a strangely long delay in people's reactions. Nobody did anything. I completely panicked and froze in my seat. My brother, on the other hand, jumped up out of his seat, jumped over the person sitting on the aisle seat to his right, and ran up to see what was going on. He was up there in a matter of seconds, and as he approached, suddenly, everyone around us stood up to see what was going on, and or try to help. She kept screaming, and now she was struggling with his passenger. He was really tall, so tall that his whole head was visible over the back of the seat, and he had long curly black hair. My brother came back to our row and said, "Something is wrong," before going back up to get a closer look. Passengers close to her began struggling with the guy as well. A bunch of people jumped on him and started pulling at him, and someone in the row behind him even pulled his hair back so hard his face jerked towards the top of the plane. He let out a really loud and moaned scream, and then there was chaos. The aisles were so crowded, nobody could move, and I saw a fire extinguisher being passed hand to hand from the back of the plane. I immediately thought that there was a fire, and we were all going to die. It was an incredibly hopeless sensation to know that there is nowhere to run, and no way to escape the situation unfolding in front of you. They passed the extinguisher up to a male flight attendant near the guy, and the flight attendant hit him with the butt of the extinguisher really hard on the face. They started to ask for belts, headphones, straps, etc., anything they could use to restrain him. My brother took off his belt and gave it to them, and they wrapped everything they could around the passenger's arms, shoulders, and torso, securing him to the seat. I saw the male flight attendant who had hit him with the extinguisher carry a pair of large black tennis shoes to the back of the plane, which at the time seemed kind of strange, but I didn't think much of it. The flight attendants asked if there was a doctor on board to sedate the guy. People kept asking if there was a flight marshal on board, but nobody came forward. I can't remember exactly how or when things calmed down, but eventually everyone was told to return to their seats. A small group of the people that helped restrain the guy were asked to keep guard on a rotation. There were always at least a few people sitting behind and or next to him, keeping an eye on him. I think that there was even someone behind him holding a fistful of his hair for the rest of the flight. The pilot announced over the PA that there had been a security breach. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was vague, and that they were being diverted to Boston Logan Airport. He said they didn't know if the person was working alone, so get to know your neighbor. We were in the middle of the Atlantic, with maybe 4 more hours to go before we would land. Things were a bit ominous and tense, but for the most part, everyone was friendly and in a pretty good mood. Nobody knew what had actually happened. We weren't allowed to get up from our seats, and if you had to use the bathroom, you needed to call a flight attendant to escort you to the lavatory, where you weren't allowed to lock the door. I remember a grumpy old Frenchman a few rows from us got really annoyed after a while and kept getting out without permission just to annoy the flight attendants. They were not happy. After a while, they put on the movie Legally Blonde to distract passengers. My brother and I went up to do business class to talk to my dad. Apparently, they didn't hear the extent of the chaos back in coach, and they were all going about business as usual, pun intended. A few hours later, we approached the U.S. We saw fighter jets outside of the windows on both sides of the plane. The pilot announced that they were escorting us to Boston. A few little kids got really excited watching the jets. I later learned that these are the last resort security measures to prevent hijacked planes from repeating 9/11 style attacks. They were supposed to shoot us down in case of a major threat. We landed and were told to stay seated. A SWAT team came on board and, carrying assault rifles and a ton of body armor, cut off all of the guy's restraints and took him off of the plane. I saw everything in detail, since we were seated only a few seats behind him at this moment. We were parked in the middle of the tarmac for a long time before we were allowed to disembark. I remember seeing pieces of my brother's belt on the guy's seat as we left, and thought about take one as a souvenir, but thought better of it. We were escorted to a baggage claim area in Boston Logan Airport that was surrounded by a large metal fence to keep us all in one place. We were there for what felt like 3 or 4 hours, just waiting anxiously, and nobody would explain anything to us. Passengers were really agitated, shaking the metal fences and yelling at airport personnel that this was inhumane treatment. There was no food, nowhere to sit, and the children were crying. Dozens of people were trying to sleep on the baggage carousel. They finally brought a bunch of pizzas and led us into the waiting area with actual chairs, where each passenger was interrogated by the FBI. They were astonishingly unfriendly. I guess they were trying to discern if the guy had any partners on board. They then shuttled us to our baggage, where security officers thoroughly hand-searched every single passenger's shoes, suitcases, and carry-on bags, and patted everyone down. We were finally allowed to make a phone call and call my mom. The rest of the family was completely hysterical. They had been watching the news all day and knew that an Islamic extremist terrorist had tried to blow up our flight with a bomb that he had smuggled on board in his shoe. We had absolutely no idea what had really happened until this moment, as we were kept completely in the dark. It was a very strange sensation. Up until this point, my dad, brother, and I had actually remained pretty relaxed, considering the circumstances, and were more annoyed about the inconvenient changes to our travel itinerary than the crazy experience on the plane. We had no idea how bad the security breach really was and how close we came to being killed. After about 12 hours in Boston, we were put on another flight home. My brother made the mistake of giving a few interviews to CNN and other networks while we were in Boston, so he landed in our small country. He was immediately swarmed by the press and gave a bunch of interviews despite being exhausted. I was happy to finally sit and relax with my family after the longest and most stressful trip of my life. We later learned that the bomber, Richard Reed, had actually tried to board the same flight on the previous day. He was detained and questioned by French security because of multiple red flags. He had no luggage and purchased a one-way ticket with cash, causing him to miss his flights. They put him on the next day's flights and put him up in a hotel kind of far from the airport, since everything nearby was booked. The following day it rained, and on the walk from the hotel to the airport, his shoe got wet. This might have been why he had trouble lighting the wick in his shoe. His plan was to light it in mid-flight. He waited until the passenger next to him went to the bathroom, then tried to light his shoe with matches. The female flight attendant that first engaged him had smelled the matches and was walking up and down the aisle looking for a passenger who she assumed was trying to smoke a cigarette. She saw him with a shoe in his lap and immediately tried to take it from him. They struggled, and he bit her hand. Reed is now serving 3 life terms in prison. She was gonna let this crazy dude in the car with us, a crazy stranger. It's a long story. I write long stories, especially when I'm telling stories that are my own. Hi there, I'm the new girl who posted here once already. I got such warm responses from y'all that I decided to open up more and share more of my crazy life stories to you all. Let me start off by explaining myself a little bit. I'm a Puerto Rican and Irish woman, 27, who grew up with pretty unconventional parents. I'm not just a typical spoiled American girl who didn't get along with my parents. I loved, still love, and still and always get along with my parents. They just allowed pretty dangerous and fucked up shit to happen around us at all times, which opened the door and threw out the red fucking carpet for pretty dangerous shit to happen to us. I mean, my dad went from leading a life of serious crime, not gonna tell you what kind, till I was 11, to again giving it all up and leading a normal work life, 9 to 5, and raising a family in one of the scariest neighborhoods in KC. When he lived in the fast lane and was always breaking the law, the type of people that frequented our home often brought drama, danger, and fear into our lives. But that was a lifestyle for them, and we were just children. Later on, when we lived normal lives in KC, my father grew exhausted, resentful, and absent, especially the last 4 to 5 years I lived with them. Him and my stepmother, who doesn't help when you're trying to raise little girls. His crazy life and constant use of me as another parent often caused me to experience scary and crazy situations, because being his child, I was often sent out to do parental tasks all alone, like pick up my sister in a scary neighborhood, which took 2 bus rides at 12 to 13, going to the stores all hours of the night to get him or her cigarettes and soda, going to appointments alone, walking and taking the bus alone everywhere I go in a shitty part of town from 11 to 7, and we were left unsupervised most of the time, unless we plonked ourselves in front of the TV anytime our father was watching it, which was and still is what he does from the second he gets home every night till the second he falls asleep, not kidding. So please, when you question whether or not some of my stories happened to me, please keep in mind that was my life, and it was just crazy when I was growing up, which caused for a lot of crazy shit to happen to me. It just happens when you live like that. It's all true. Every single word. When I first moved to KC, I never had my hair braided. I'm Puerto Rican, but I don't have the same hair texture that my dad has, as well as a lot of my family. My hair is naturally curly, but it favors my white Irish mother's hair texture. So I never really need to braid my hair or wear any weaves like my cousins did. So when I finally got around to getting my hair braided for the first time, I was 11 years old. My family and I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, so when a friend of his from work came over to braid my hair, we had to hang out in the living room with the rest of the family. It was really crowded. My dad never mentioned to me how much that shit hurts when it's done for the first time. And oh my god, did it hurt when she went over to the center of my head. I cried for like the last 15 minutes. During the session, my dad did nothing but give me shit the whole time, laughing and calling me a pussy. This pissed me off, but I was 11 and he's my dad, so I just laughed it off. His friend didn't want to ever come back to do my hair again, which upset me, since the kids in the school were all like, "Thank God you finally got your hair done, you look so much better." That all lasted until my white mom told me to take the braids out and wear my hair in the style that resulted from having such tight braids in your hair, which was a fucking fro. I had snickers and fingers pointing in my direction the second I walked into the school doors. It was awful and I was pissed, because my dad's friend just never said she'd come do my hair again, which was just the end of the world. Fast forward to quite a bit later, honestly, probably a whole different school year later, and my dad comes home to tell me that his friend wants to do my hair, and if I wanted to, I need to call her so she could come and get me. I was so excited that I grabbed the phone right away and made plans for that night. She shows up about an hour later to get me and bring me back to her house, which totally sucked for me because she lived extremely far away. I don't remember how exactly far away, as this was like 16 years ago, but she insisted we went back to her place. When we got back to her place, it took her forever to get started. She literally packed a whole vacation and made dinner before doing my hair. It was getting late, and I remember thinking that my dad was going to be pissed, but I didn't care at the moment. We eventually got started on my hair, and she let me in on a little secret she was keeping about knowing how to do these tight-ass designs on my head. So I was all about her for the whole time she was braiding my head. I listened to her tell me how she hated my dad, and how she thought he was fucking rude when she came over to do my hair last time, but that she needed the money for her trip, so she brought me over there. I didn't realize her and my dad weren't actually work friends until that night, but still I didn't care. As usual, it took forever to do my hair, and because of all the time she spent doing other things, by the time she started to bring me back, it was late as hell. There was literally no one on the road, and my dad was blowing up her phone asking where I am. She would just answer the phone and talk shit to him about being such a dick, but continued to take her sweet time moving along no matter what. We were the only cars on the road, and I just started to feel weird about this woman. She just gave a weird vibe when we started to drive home, and because of that, I became anxious, alert, and on edge the whole way to my place. We crossed into the downtown area, and being as that this was a time before GPS or even Google Maps had gained popularity, her and I just drove all over the extremely dead city forever while she and I tried to remember how to get back home. Back around this time, downtown KCMO was not the fun, nice area it is now. My parents and I lived in a low-income apartment building, and the only people we saw around the city were those who worked in the offices, and homeless people hanging around and going to the library. Downtown was a pretty sketchy area, and honestly, every city is at night, but this area was sketchy because there's no reasons to honestly be around most of downtown after certain hours, unless you're up to no good, since everything was closed. She kept going down wrong roads and getting frustrated, and began to get pissed off until all of a sudden, when parked at a light, a skinny white man, wearing a big t-shirt, shorts, and no shoes, walked up to the car and started knocking on the windows. He looked like he was out of his mind. He didn't look like he was lost or like he was in distress or danger. He just looked upset, twitchy, and not all there. I began praying for the light to change so that her and I could get as far away from this crazy man as possible before he got angry at us for ignoring him, which was what any normal person would do. But no, she decided to shock me and just scared the shit out of me by rolling down her window talking to him. I looked at her like she just lost her goddamn mind. I asked her what the fuck she was doing, and she just ignored me and asked the man if he needed anything. He told her he was in a mental hospital because his shit crazy friends put him there, and he was so alone and needed someone to help him. She just kept talking to the crazy man while I began thinking of ways to beat him to death if he tried to get into the car and hurt us. They talked for what seemed like forever. He was trying to be cool, but he just looked sick and terrifying to me. And then he asked to get into the car. She did seem put off and confused, but then to my astonishment, this crazy lady was letting this crazy man into the car in the middle of the empty city in the early hours of the morning when nothing but horrible shit happens. I was like, my dad is not going to be happy when he finds out you let this man into the car with me in it. She still continues to make room for him, slowly in the back, almost like she didn't want to, but she didn't want him to find her rude. What the fuck, I snapped at her. Hey, if he gets in the car, I'm getting out and walking home. He can't get into this car. She pauses for a second, having what looked like a moment of clarity, and stared at me like she was sorry, but didn't know what to do. The man continues to beg for us to let him in, until all of a sudden, 2 police officers show up, on foot, out of fucking nowhere. They start yelling at him to leave us alone, as if they were there the whole time, guardian angels. They push them away from the car and were yelling at him, asking what the fuck he was doing there. He starts frantically fighting them and yelling back at them, until they both have him on the ground restraining him. Finally, this chick did something right, and fucking floored it out of that situation, and took me the fuck home. When I got home, I did nothing but talk so much shit on her to my dad, which he seemed to love, and used it to feel whatever sudden hatred they had for each other. I told him all the shit that she had said about him, how her dumbass almost got us raped and killed. I was hating on her ass full hardcore, and I never got my hair braided by her again. I ended up going to some lady in my apartment building a few times before learning how to press my hair and finding my favorite new and still straight and long hairdo. So, idiot chick for my dad's job and crazy random man trying to get in her car, let's never meet again. Like ever. A train journey from hell. So this story happened back in 2016. I was 18 years old and planning on visiting my girlfriend. We live in different cities in the UK, so I decided to get a train and visit her for the weekend. The train I caught was slightly earlier than I had booked, but some UK trains have the option for more flexible times as long as it isn't rush hour. It was 5 a.m. in the winter, it was cold, dark, and miserable, and I just stepped on the platform to wait for it to pull up to the station when a roughly 60-year-old man came and stood next to me. By next to me, I mean he was really less than 20 centimeters away and practically leaning on me, despite almost no one else around, so it's not like the area was cramped. He was balding, wore thick rimmed glasses, with incredibly strong prescriptions by the look of it. He was significantly taller than me. I'd say he was close to 6'6", but slim and gone with coarse graying skin and had an unusually wide mouth and a straggly beard that looked like it needed a good trim. He was dressed in a black, baggy hoodie that was pulled over his head and wore fatigue jeans that looked as if they were close to falling apart at any moment. I stepped away, trying to politely put some distance between us, and fortunately, he didn't follow me any further. The train pulled up and I stepped onto the carriage, found a seat, put my headphones in, and tried to nap for the duration of my 3-hour journey. The train was mainly empty. A few tired workers slumped in the corner, sleeping off the work from the night before, and a couple of old women chatted quietly between themselves. The journey was mainly painless, and I mainly forgotten the old man, and couldn't see him either my carriage or the ones adjacent, so paid the thought of him little attention. It was about an hour into the journey when the train went into a short tunnel. It couldn't have been in for more than 20 seconds, but I felt a strong hand grab my right leg. I jerked out of my dazed, half-asleep state, only to find that, as the train exited the darkness, the old man was sitting directly next to me, still grasping my leg hard enough that it would later leave a light bruise along the thigh. I pulled my leg away and quickly asked him what he thought he was doing. I'm not an intimidating person. A pretty fat teenager that barely reaches 5'8" is never going to be a scary sight, but I put on my most confident and authoritative voice and repeated my question, though this time it was louder and contained a few more choice words for the odd man. I barely managed to finish the question before he grabbed my face with his hand and slammed my head against the window so that I was pinned in place. Despite my struggles, he easily held me in place and leaned in until he was only inches from my squished face. With a deep baritone voice that seemed to echo around in my brain, he whispered directly into my ear something similar to, "You'd be a very nice plaything." I apologize, I can't remember the exact words. The adrenaline that had me freaking out made it difficult to concentrate on things like that, but I vividly remember he knew my name. He then licked the exposed side of my face slowly until a bridge above the tracks blocked what little light was trickling into the carriage. As the light dimmed, I felt the hand release my face, and I snapped to look at where the man had been sitting, but he had already disappeared from view. I rose shakily from my seat and rushed to the toilet to vomit from the fear. I stayed in there for over an hour before an inspector knocked on the door to check my ticket. I'd informed him what had happened, and he escorted me to police officers at the next station, who swept the entire train for the man. It was treated as an assault, so the police viewed the CCTV from the train, but were unable to identify the old guy. I nearly broke down in a panic attack when they said they couldn't find him. But that wasn't even the worst part. When police later viewed the CCTV that covered the route I took to reach the train station, they stated that the same tall, black-hooded man could be seen following me for almost 2 miles, starting from just outside my house. To this day, I refuse to return to that city. I moved away after about 2 months later, and I've made a promise to myself that I will never ever ride a train again.